I'm John Heilemann.
And I'm Mark Halperin. With all due respect to Twitter, we heart you.
That's it. 3 words. 3 words with a heart.
On our off election year show tonight, Obama lashes out and my personal TED Talk. But first, a reminder, Synchronized watches now. About a year from this first Tuesday of November, we'll be picking our next president. Will it be Hillary Clinton, Donald Trump, or maybe Marco Rubio? Speaking of which, Newton's fourth law of politics stipulates that anything that goes up must come under the microscope. As he is criticized for a Senate attendance record by Jeb Bush, Donald Trump, and others, today Marco Rubio delayed and scaled back a fundraising trip to Manhattan so he could cast a procedural vote in Washington on an agriculture bill related to water quality. That's a move that could play well in the farmlands of Iowa, but it also means fewer dollars for a candidate who did not post a very impressive cash haul last quarter. John, everybody's focused on how Rubio is doing in the state and national polls so far since the debate. A little bit better, to be sure. But what other factors are going to determine if Rubio actually is going to continue his right to rise?
Well, the money thing is obviously huge, and you suggested why. On 2 fronts, the Paul Singer endorsement from the other day, how many people will follow Singer's footsteps, follow his lead among the donor class here on the Eastern Seaboard. And as you point out, Rubio's been talked up a lot over the course of the last year, and it was being talked up a fair amount coming out of that debate in Simi Valley, but the dollars didn't follow. So he needs, if he's going to still fight off some of these big boys like Jeb Bush, who still has a lot of money in his super PAC, he's going to need some dough.
On the money front, a couple things. First of all, Singer was a big get, and Singer will do a big haul for him on the fourth quarter. But so far, in talking to Rubio people and Bush people, no Bush defections to Rubio. Not a lot of people, new people, except for Singer, signing up. And Rubio, so far, despite doing well in the immediate aftermath of the debate, his people don't expect him to be a great grassroots fundraiser. Right. Raising those small dollars, like Carson has, like Bernie Sanders has, that's a big deal. I don't see why Rubio isn't, but he isn't.
It doesn't make any sense to me. He's the, again, I don't want to
future-oriented,
take away all the various connotations of saying he's the Obama of 2016. Just in this one respect, he's the generational candidate. He's the one who talks about the sharing economy and Airbnb and Uber. Why is that guy not a good internet fundraiser?
So far he isn't, and that has huge implications because he's not done particularly well in the $2,700 checks. The other variable is the Senate thing. He's got to go back to vote. They're saying it's because he's going to choose between what he needs to go back for that's important. He doesn't need to vote on unimportant things. But clearly he's feeling at least some heat, about this, and he can't control Mitch McConnell. He can't control the Senate schedule. This could create problems for him as he tries to be both a senator who doesn't miss votes and a candidate.
And the last thing I think, look, and crowd size is often overstated as a metric of anything, but in a race where Donald Trump can show up and fill a stadium or fill a 3,000, 4,000 person hall, where Ben Carson gets large crowds who come out to see him everywhere, who's got some kind of spark in the establishment bracket? Are we going to see that with Rubio? I know.
Excuse me, it could be Marco Rubio.
Oh my God. All right.
The thing about
Rubio calling to tell you I've got 3,000 people here with me right now.
The thing is he's got to get the virtuous cycle going. Poll numbers go up, better press coverage, more money coming in, announces fundraising figures, better poll numbers, better coverage, etc. He does not have the virtuous cycle going yet.
But maybe
incrementally, but he needs it to keep revving.
Now we're going to talk about an unvirtuous part of the cycle. Between running for a presidential campaign and running his business, Donald Trump has apparently found time to dabble in that most venerable of American political and self-promotional pastimes, writing a campaign book. And at a party celebrating the publication of Trump's tome, which is entitled Crippled America and subtitled, you guessed it, How to Make America Great Again. Trump was at Trump Tower today, and he escalated his assault on the aforementioned Marco Rubio. In our interview with Trump yesterday, Trump called Rubio a lightweight who sweated too much. But today, he got a lot more specific and a lot more pointed, zeroing in on something that Trump knows just a wee bit about: personal finances.
Marco Rubio described his questions about his personal finances as discredited. Do you think
Marco Rubio's personal finances are discredited?
He says a tax on his personal finances.
Oh, no, his personal finance. All you have to do is look at his credit card. I mean, he is a disaster with his credit cards. And I'll tell you what, I love Florida. I'm in Florida all the time. And for years I've been hearing that his credit cards are a disaster. I would think when you take a look at it, you're going to find that. But his credit card debt and his problems with credit card and what he did when he was running the party apparatus with credit cards, I've heard about it for years. You'll have to find out.
Would you trust him to manage the country's finances or your finances?
Well, he has a very bad record of finances. If you look at what happened with his houses, with his, he certainly lives above his means. There's no question about that.
Trump did not just go after Rubio himself. He also took aim at one of Rubio's major donors, and again, the aforementioned hedge fund manager Paul Singer.
Ultimately, I think Marco's going to be hurt very badly. And if you look at Mr. Singer, you have to see where Mr. Singer is coming from. And when you see where he's coming from, I think people are going to say, whoa, we didn't know that.
Ask one more. You said something about Paul Singer before and raised some questions. What specifically did you mean?
You're going to look. A lot of controversy.
Like what? Name a lot of controversy. Like what areas?
There are those people that probably wouldn't have wanted him to back.
Why?
But we'll see. I'll talk to you. Go ahead.
So Donald Trump is not the first person to question Marco Rubio's finances. The New York Times did that a while back. He will not be the last either, I would wager. So my question to you, Mark, is how vulnerable do you think Rubio actually is on that issue and other vetting issues?
As we've discussed before, the Times shooting and missing, the debate moderator the other night shooting and missing, Rubio can say to the base, this is all a liberal attack. Many people around Jeb Bush, many people, including Donald Trump, think in the end, Rubio's going to have to run the gauntlet on this issue at least one more time.
Right.
And there's going to be a deeper dive into the personal finances. And I think it'll depend on how he handles it. Bill Clinton showed you can survive anything.
Yeah, well, that's true.
You handle it well.
Yes, but I'm not sure Marco Rubio is yet in the Bill Clinton category. Out in Los Angeles, California, Mike Murphy, who's done more negative campaigns and more negative ads than any strategist, any consultant, any ad maker we know. You know he's got that oppo. You know he's got whatever there is on Marco Rubio. Mike Murphy's got it. He has not wanted to go negative so far at this early stage, but I cannot believe that there's not going to be a lot of heavyweight negative advertising coming out of Right to Rise headed directly on this issue at Rubio.
And I will predict, just based on the past of other candidates, not based on anything I know about Marco Rubio, that he is going to face, if he continues to rise, some issue that none of us have ever heard of in the national media, in the national politics, and he's going to face new facts, and he's going to have to answer it. And I'll be curious to see if his team is ready for it, because they were not particularly ready for the first round of this.
And even aside from the campaigns who will go after him, of whom there will be a lot, I just imagine now that the Miami Herald, other papers in Florida, that is a swamp politics situation down there. There's going to be stories.
Yeah. All right. Like the big bad wolf, Republican campaign spent this weekend huffing and puffing about the debates. But now it appears as if the Rebel Alliance has fallen apart. Some of the candidates, including John Kasich, Carly Fiorina, and Chris Christie, as well as others who haven't said so publicly yet, are refusing to sign a joint letter of demands to send to the network sponsors of the pending debates. And, of course, Mr. Trump has said he wants to negotiate all by himself, although he's not complaining very much about the current state of affairs, he says. All right, Fox Business, who's hosting the debate next week, has set out criteria that says to get on the stage in Milwaukee, you've got to reach 2.5 in an average of some polls. They haven't said which ones nationally. That could boot one or more of the main stage candidates from the past debates into the undercard debate. John, who are the biggest winners and losers if we do see a slimmed down debate, whereas 2 or 3 possibly candidates fall off and we get down to 9, 8, or 7.
I mean, I don't want to say the most obvious thing, which is that the candidates who get kicked on the
they'd be losers.
They would be the losers, right? But look, I think winners are going to be potentially, again, double-edged sword. Ben Carson, a guy who talks all the time about how he wants more time to talk, wants more time to elaborate, that this rapid-fire round of how these debates has gone has not worked to his advantage, he believes. I don't know whether he has a lot to say, but if he's up there with only 6 people, we will hear a lot more from Ben Carson and find out whether there's any depth there.
You do the math. You drop one guy off, the time spreads out pretty evenly. You know, Trump said today he thinks the people down at 1% or 0% should get out of the race. That wouldn't solve the problem of 10 people on the debate stage.
Just kill off the undercard.
But it's going to be interesting to see if it is smaller, if people step up more. You know, one of the big dynamics from the last debate for Jeb Bush and a few others is they learn that if they don't try to butt in, they don't get talk time. But butting in, it doesn't fit with their personality. They're going to have to wait to see if the moderators enforce the equal time a little bit better. Fewer candidates makes that calculus a little bit easier. I think it'll help Jeb Bush. I suspect it would make him feel less off his game.
And less rushed and not too much performance. Exactly. I'll tell you who the other big loser I think would be, most specifically, Chris Christie, a guy who's starting to get a little momentum. If he gets up off the main debate stage, boy, that would just cut all the oxygen off and he would be doomed. All right, up next. We got polls, we got the president, and we got our powwow with Ted Cruz. We'll be back in exactly 60 seconds. There are 2 big mega polls out today. An NBC News, Wall Street Journal national poll that shows Ben Carson leading the Republican field with 29%. That's up 7 points from 2 weeks ago. Donald Trump is second with 23%. And Marco Rubio is in third with 11%. Both are down slightly from before the last Republican debate, which is interesting. On the Democratic side, Hillary Clinton has extended her lead nationally. She now doubles Bernie Sanders' support across the country. The real news, however, on the Democratic side is in New Hampshire, where a Monmouth University poll shows Clinton leading Bernie Sanders for the first time in the Granite State since this summer. Mark, bunch of numbers. What interests you most about them?
On the Democratic side, look, if Hillary Clinton can come back in New Hampshire, and this poll will give her campaign confidence, they've said all along that race is closer than a lot of the public polls. Obviously, she could end the Democratic race in February if she can win that state. And second is, Trump dismissed last week's poll that showed Carson ahead. Right. But now Trump really has to consider that maybe he's not the national frontrunner. We'll see going forward, but have a big implication for what he might do. Right.
Then, the ABC Wall Street Journal poll is a gold standard poll. It's very, very good. This is not a cheap poll. It's not an online poll. It's a real poll. Having Carson up there in that spot really does, and it's going to have to make Trump not just wonder whether he's really the front runner, but wonder whether he's going to have to start taking Carson on, something that he hasn't really done so far. On the Democratic side, totally agree with you. I have always thought that the Sanders home state advantage in New Hampshire was overplayed, given the historic connection of the state to the Clintons. I think Hillary Clinton could win that state if she stays on this roll.
If you look at Trump's internals and the crosstabs in national and state polls, in a lot of polls, people still think he's the best. They think he wouldn't be the most dignified president, or doesn't know how to do the job, but they think he'd be the best on the economy, most likely to win, etc. The trait that's gone backwards in that journal poll is fave unfave, and I think Trump would do himself some good if he could get closer to Ben Carson in favorable unfavorable.
Right. Well, and the amazing dynamic also in that poll, which our pollster Ann Selzer points out, looking at the numbers, which is that the guy who the party thinks is most qualified to be president, has most of the attributes, is Jeb Bush, and yet he's still lagging in the poll. Yep. That tells you a lot about the Republican dynamic.
All right, don't be alarmed, but last night there was a weapon of mass destruction here in New York City. His name was Barack Obama. Listen to this perfectly timed laser shot he aimed at the Republicans while he was raising money for the DNC here in Gotham City.
Have you noticed that every one of these candidates say, Obama's weak. Putin's kicking sand in his face. When I talk to Putin, he's going to straighten out. Just looking at him, he's going to be. And then it turns out they can't handle a bunch of CNBC moderators.
The president also pushed back on Republican candidates who have been using his presidency as a punching bag all this year.
According to them, everything was really good in 2008, when we were going through the worst economic crisis in our lifetimes. Unemployment and uninsured rates were up, and we were hopelessly addicted to foreign oil, and bin Laden was still on the loose. This apparently was the golden age that I messed up.
Those sound bites, John, are a reminder that this president is still very much a political force, even though he won't be on the ballot. How potent a weapon can he be from now to Election Day next year?
Potent, really potent. Because, look, the bottom line is that whatever you want to say about Barack Obama's governance, as a political performer, he's better than anybody running for president in the Republican Party and better than anybody who's running for president in the Democratic Party right now. And in a race that's going to matter in terms of getting the base out, getting turnout up, that guy still really popular and really good at that.
And just has a level of performance skill that swamps anybody, and clearly will have his heart, obviously, into getting a Democrat to succeed him.
Yes.
I'll tell you, Mitt Romney is being talked about more and more in elite Republican circles as a guy who could end up as the nominee, as someone who could win a general election against Hillary Clinton. Don't be surprised if in the coming weeks you see Mitt Romney out there trying to match Barack Obama as a surrogate for his son.
Well, you remember how well that worked out in 2012. Romney's political skills always right up there with Barack Obama's. That's a really even match if we get to see that.
And yet, Mitt Romney's political skills right now, better than almost anybody in the Republican race in terms of performing on a national stage.
Except for Mr. Trump.
After the break, what Ted Cruz told me in Iowa over the weekend about taxes and stuff. We'll be right back. Senator Ted Cruz got high marks, and justifiably so, at the last debate for his appeal for more substantive policy questions. So it is fitting and proper that when I caught up with him in Iowa this weekend, we spent time talking about one of the wonkiest things in American politics, tax policy. The current code is pretty complicated, right? Your plan, you're trying to simplify. So take your best shot. Explain simply what your plan would do if enacted.
Well, listen, the current tax plan is a complete mess. There are more words in it than the Bible, and it is filled with loopholes and special interest carve-outs. People are fed up with it, and they're fed up also with an abusive and out-of-control IRS that has been used to target political speech. I think we need fundamental reform. I'm campaigning on what I call the simple flat tax. It means for every individual, it's a simple flat tax rate of 10%. That applies to everyone. That means every one of us can fill out our taxes on a postcard, and after that, we can abolish the IRS as we know it, end it altogether. Now, what does that mean for a family of four? For a family of four, the first $36,000 you earn, you pay zero. Zero income tax, zero payroll tax, zero nothing.
So family of four, $36,000, they pay no tax of any kind.
No tax of any kind, and not only is no income tax, but we abolish the payroll tax. For working men and women, for many Americans, the payroll tax is the biggest tax they pay. We take that to zero.
Okay, so again, we'll get to the upper incomes, but for the payroll taxes go towards retirement programs. How do you make up that revenue?
So we make it up because in addition to the flat 10% tax for individuals, we put in place a 16% business flat tax. So on businesses, we eliminate the corporate income tax, we eliminate the Obamacare taxes, but a 16% flat business tax that applies to everyone. And you know, the virtue of that is it ends the discrimination in the tax code. Right now, you have giant corporations with armies of accountants who sometimes pay little to no taxes.
Or get refunds.
With the 16% business flat tax, everyone pays the same, so that the small businesses who get hammered right now under our tax code pay the exact same 16% rate that the giant corporations do. It's fair and even and uniform for everyone, and it generates the revenue. This program sends the identical revenue to Social Security and Medicare that the existing program does, but it does so in a much fairer way.
So go back to the individual side of things. Everybody pays 10%, as you said. Family of four, $36,000, they pay nothing. They pay less. Does any entity, either individual or business, pay more either actually or theoretically under your plan?
I don't know about any individual. I know that every income decile sees a decrease, a real cut in taxes, that is from the very poorest to the very richest, and every single income decile, when you factor in growth, sees a double-digit increase of at least 14% increase in after-tax income. So the example I used a minute ago, if you're a single mom making $40,000 a year, a 14% increase in your after-tax income is an additional $5,600 in your pocket for you to spend. And the virtues of this plan, the Nonpartisan Tax Foundation has scored everybody's tax plan. It's concluded, of the 10 candidates on that debate stage, the plan that produces the most jobs is the Cruz simple flat tax, 4.9 million jobs. After-tax income for everyone increasing at least 14%, wages going up, capital investment going up, and it has a dramatic impact on economic growth. Growth is the key to turning around the challenges we have.
Last question, because they're telling me to wrap up. I didn't get to talk to you about making up the lost revenue with dynamic scoring. We won't do that today. I'm sure we'll talk about it another time. You're choosing to keep the major deductions in place for home mortgage, for charitable. Why? What's the logic of keeping those when, for a lot of people, the virtue of flat tax is to get rid of the deductions brought in the base?
So we preserve the charitable tax deduction. We preserve the home mortgage deduction, capped at $500,000 of principal. And we also preserve the child tax credit.
What about state and local taxes?
We do not have that deduction. The purpose was really twofold. Number one, when we sat down to design this, it was an explicit objective of mine that I wanted every income decile to see significant increases in after-tax income. And so that was a component in making those decisions. But secondly, you need a plan that is actually politically saleable. And there are tremendous constituencies very focused on those exemptions. With respect to the charitable exemption, I think it has a huge public policy benefit in that the more you have churches and charities and private organizations caring for the needy, the less government has to step in and do it, and I think churches and the charities are much more effective. So preserving the charitable tax deduction is important. You know, let me make another point that is significant, which is this business tax, the business flat tax of 16% is what's called border adjustable. That means for any manufacturer in this country who is exporting, they don't pay it. they don't pay the 16% tax, which means suddenly American exports are markedly more competitive. American crops, American products are markedly more competitive because they don't pay the 16% tax. That will mean that our sales all over the world will go up. Now, the flip side of that is, for imports that are coming in, every import pays the 16% business flat tax. So that is essentially a new tax on imports of 16%. Now, it's the same tax being paid by American producers, so it has a level playing field.
How much revenue would that bring in?
The impact altogether, this is predicted at the end of the day, after 10 years, to decrease aggregate revenue by about $770 billion, less than $1 trillion. I think that actually underestimates it because the modeling doesn't capture, for example, foreign companies moving to America and bringing jobs here, because it will be much more attractive to create a business here. You know, the Democrats talk a lot about corporate inversions. And the reasons companies are fleeing America and going to foreign countries is we've created a tax environment and a regulatory environment that is so inhospitable that companies and jobs are fleeing. If we enact the Cruz simple tax plan, the result will be other countries in 4 or 8 years will be complaining about corporate inversions because their companies will be fleeing their countries, coming to America, and the booming growth. Let me give you an analogy. Under Obama, from 2008 to the present, our economy has grown on average 1.2% a year. If we don't turn that around, we can't solve any of these problems. When JFK ran for president, he campaigned on 5% economic growth. And he enacted tax cuts and regulatory reform policies the modern Democratic Party has abandoned. It used to be JFK and JFK Democrats understood that tax reform produces jobs and economic growth, and we saw 5% economic growth. We can do that again with real leadership. That's what the Cruz simple flat tax is all about.
The politics of tax reform are so complicated. He talked about his tax plan in this event in Iowa. It's hard to do it in an interview. It's really hard to do it in the stump when you're trying to fire up a crowd, right, if you're going to get into any detail. You think Cruz or any of their 5 or 6 who have specific tax plans can actually get political advantage out of it in the nomination fight?
Well, I think that the main place that you get political advantage is with elites who will then write about your tax plan. So Rubio has gotten some advantage from his tax plan because a lot of
Wall Street Journal editorial page hates it.
Well, that's one place. But he obviously has other cheering section for that, saying it's pro-family, pro-working class. Look, the biggest problem here you raised, you said we'll come back to this another time because God knows a dynamic scoring discussion is killer. But boy, that looks to me like a giant budget buster, that tax plan.
Depends how you scored. It's not as big as, say, Trump's. All right, up next, we put Democratic pollster and former Clinton advisor Stanley Greenberg in the hot seat over his new book, America Ascendant, after this word from our sponsors.
Greenberg, where are you? There's going to be a poll that's going to come out, which we did jointly. It's going to show extraordinary changes on the favorabilities. It shows us with favorable, with a net positive favorable, about 10 point more favorable. Bush more negative, net negative by about 10, and pro even, fave unfave at around 37. So that represents good 6-point change or more. Obviously, we're doing something right.
That was a classic clip from the classic 1993 Clinton campaign documentary by D.A. Pennebaker, The War Room. Joining us now, the man you just saw, Democratic pollster and author of the new book, America Ascendant, Stan Greenberg. It's great to see you here, Stan.
Thank you. Great to be here.
As a way into the topic, which is, of course, this book, what's changed in America politically and electorally since 1992?
Absolutely everything. Everything. The Democratic Party was dealing with an old industrial party, an old industrial order. Here we're dealing with revolutions that are changing the country, big, huge revolutions that I argue in the book are going to make America dynamic, ascendant economically and culturally. But it's producing disruptive changes to family, to economy, to way of life, to our cities, conflict with millennials and baby boomers and all of that. Big, big, big issues to be dealt with. So we're pointing to the future. In some ways, that was the past.
Let me just say this real quick, just because we have a lot to talk about with you. But,
okay.
you know, Bill Clinton there was a lot of change going on in 1992, as
yes.
you will recall. Bill Clinton, Al Gore, they were generationally in tune with the changes that were happening, globalization, the information revolution, the new economy. They talked about that a lot, right? So these changes that are happening now, is Hillary Clinton as well in tune with the changes you're describing now as her husband was back then?
Based on what she's advanced, as she's promoted her own candidacy. If you look at her 4 pillars that she's laid out, yeah, I'm actually quite surprised on how quickly she has stepped into this kind of perspective about what's happening to the country, and it's about the future.
She stopped talking about the 4 pillars, but maybe she'll come back.
There have been a few distractions, indeed.
So you are brimming with Trumpian optimism. I mean, you see a lot of positive ones, but as you said, there's also a lot of negative stuff. The right track, wrong track number has been a lot more Americans saying we're on the wrong track than the right track.
Yeah.
The trends you're citing, which ones have to kind of kick in more, do you think, for Americans a majority to say we're on the right track?
Well, I think we're talking about I think historic changes. We got to go through some period of really disruptive changes. I don't think what we're looking at is linear. Look, I'm talking about revolutions that are changing this new American majority that we're looking at electorally, but it's really a cultural majority that's dominant values that will ultimately dominate politics.
But are we 5 years away? 7 years? 10 years?
It's
20?
Now.
It's now.
We're beyond the tipping point.
So next year,
if we've gone from 51% of the electorate being these new groups, racial minorities, single women, millennials, and seculars, all of these are the rising groups, they're going to be 63% in this election.
But that doesn't mean people are going to be happy. That's a lot of change, but that doesn't mean people are going to be happy.
No, the happy comes when the leaders of the country finally say, we have new problems, big new kinds of problems, inequality,
and has Barack Obama not done that?
Wage stagnation? No, not even close. No, look, he's addressed big problems, but I think I've been pretty clear and a little bit critical that he's not educated the country to the kind of structural problems that we currently face.
So one of the things about the rise of the coalition of the ascendant, as you pointed out, Hispanics, other racial minorities, single college-educated women, what is now the Democratic coalition. One of the things as that has happened is an argument in the party about the white working class, which used to be a really important part of the New Deal coalition. Are you now in the camp of those who say Democrats can afford to write off the white working class, or do you think it's still important to argue for them, and how do they do it if it's still important?
Well, I do write about it in this book, which I'm sure you will want to read.
This book, America Ascendant.
America Ascendant, on this very subject. But look, what I argue is we have massive change. We tend to think of the white working class as coming out of industrial occupations, blue collar, more male. Okay. There is a white working class that is struggling, really struggling, and facing problems, but they are more in sales and service jobs. There are more women than men, and so when I say we have to address the white working class, we just have to recognize it's not the old white working class. Right, it's the new white working class.
So I mean, again, most people perceive, and I think the data bears it out, that Barack Obama did not perform particularly well with any segment of the white working class in his election and re-election. So what is Hillary Clinton? Why is Hillary Clinton? How does she address that? And how does she stand relative to that challenge?
Well, look, what I've been arguing is that President Obama has been silent on these issues. Look, he's been busy. He's rescued us from financial crisis. He's brought universal health care.
Probably not too busy to ignore a whole class of Americans.
He's dealing with huge foreign policy issues. I'm not saying I think he'll be an historic president and judge positively, but on the question of these structural economic changes, and not just economic, social changes, breakdown of the family, kids being raised by single parent, working women without 2/3 of households have a woman as a breadwinner or co-breadwinner. Huge changes. There's been no policies to address. They have not been at the center of his agenda, and I understand it. But it will be at the center of. If you look at any of the Democratic candidates, that's the agenda they're addressing, and that will reach out to white working class.
You've done a lot of work around the world. Are we unique, or is every industrialized democracy facing these same deep problems?
No, I think we're totally unique.
Why?
We're totally unique. We're unique because of, first of all, we have in the book you'll see, and it's the kind of thing that I think Walter Isaacson appreciated. We just have this unique combination of where technology is centered, where education and research is centered, where energy country, is centered in terms of the multiple types of energy. Immigration, probably more than anything, and I'll come back to that. The growth of the millennials. We have a young population, which is not true almost any place else. But then combine that with the diversity of the country and the ability to have a framework for turning that diversity into a common identity. That's what's unique about America. Immigration is the biggest piece. And that's why I think where the Republicans are most misaligned with what's happening to the country.
So except for your hope and belief that there'll be a new Democratic president and whoever that is will focus on these issues, it's still not clear to me what's giving you cause for all this optimism.
What's optimism? My optimism about the country is that when I look at first of all, I'm looking at a country that genuinely is economically dynamic and culturally very unique. We have, look at what's happening with migration anywhere else in the world, and certainly in Europe. We have 1 in 5 migrants in the world are in the U.S. But we have a framework for immigration, migrants becoming part of a unified, multicultural American identity. We're almost alone. There may be Brazil, maybe Canada, but we're almost alone with that kind of identity, which makes it possible for us to benefit from immigration. So that's unique. That makes me But I'm looking at political change. I'm looking at not political change. I'm looking at reform. Look at what's happening in the cities and states. Look what's happening in businesses. If I look at climate change, look at what's happened on the business side of that issue. So there's a lot going on to address these issues.
What's the thing that's happening in a state that you're talking about?
Well, look at Connecticut. I always view as a model on. We have a.
I got to stop you there. Most people I know who live in Connecticut think economically and politically it's the most dysfunctional state in the country now. So give me another one. Don't go with Connecticut.
Look at California. Look at Connecticut. But the key is if you look at the progressive era, and that's the model that I'm looking at here. We had Industrial Revolution, made America ascendant, but had huge problems that had to be addressed. Had a progressive era, began with reforms at the local and state level and privately, and
what's
in the media.
What's a reform in Connecticut or California you're talking about?
Here you're talking rising the minimum wage. You're talking about paid sick days, paid leave. You're talking about child care, universal health care. All of those things are advanced as part of making work pay in this modern economy.
Now, as I think we have pretty clearly established, you are a bone-deep partisan, a bone-deep Democratic partisan. So I'm going to ask you...
Republicans like this book.
Well, I'm going to ask you this...
Republican pollsters
I'm going to ask you now to put aside your partisanship.
Yes.
And I know you think the Republican Party is deeply out of alignment with the rising new American majority and the ascendant America you described in the book. What are some hopeful signs that Republicans might get their act together in the way that would be compatible with your analysis? Either something a candidate has said that you can praise, a development that's happened in the party that you can say, hey, that's dangerous, Republicans seem to get it. Give me one thing like that without trashing the GOP.
No. First of all, I'm not trashing the GOP. What I'm saying is what is happening now is given in the fact that Republicans have mobilized to fight. It's not just that we have these trends. They have mobilized to fight against this new majority, and they have polarized the country to do it. And therefore, they've alienated themselves from that. And also, they've created a party that has a quarter of the voters are strong Tea Party, which I believe will go to Trump, and half are social conservatives. And why I think you'll then get, a Cruz emerge.
Give me one.
What I think happens. What I think is, I think this will be a shattering election. I think this will be like 1984.
If Republicans,
I think this is 1984.
If Republicans are in,
I think when we look after 84, the Democrats ran with their mainstream candidate, who supported the policies of the past. They got wiped out in a landslide. You then had the heart reform Democrats bringing an independent and more upscale voters, college-educated voters into the electorate. You then had Hart maybe would have won in 88, certainly Clinton in 92. Right. So what I'm saying is the story for me is this is not linear. I think Republicans will play a big part of the change in the future.
We've got less.
Change will come from the reaction to an election that is not.
We've got less than a minute, but I'm a little confused. Republicans are so horrible and out of touch. They control the House, the Senate, more governorships than when Barack Obama took office, dominating state legislators. So. They must be doing something right.
Okay. When you get done reading the book, you will see this is a period of time where this was the last chapter of their battle to stop this new American majority from governing. That's why they're so intense and crazed that their leaders are failing. That's why they've been able to raise turnout, nationalize every election. But I think we will look back on that period. It's not going to continue. You will have an election, a shattering election, where they will then have these factions will battle then over the future of the party.
Stan, I think it's awesome that I offered you the opportunity to point to one place where Republicans get it. And you couldn't even find one, but you predict that they will at some point get it in generations in the future. Stanley Greenberg, thank you so much. The book, again, is America Ascendant. After the break, we'll be right back with the best Obama and Trump impression you'll ever see from a single human you've never seen.
Donald Trump's new book is out today. It's called Crippled America. Earlier, he was at Trump Tower autographing copies, talking to voters, and, well, he was just Donald being Donald. Pretty much all presidential candidates have books and book signings, but like everything else with Donald Trump, this one was just a little bit different, a little bit more huge. It wasn't at a Barnes & Noble, it was at the skyscraper in Manhattan bearing his name. And the book signing was preceded by a long press conference with reporters from around the world.
French television. He's just saying he's from Italy. You're with Telemundo. Ah, welcome.
What are the top three biggest threats to your candidacy now?
I don't see threats. I mean, whatever it is I have to do. Mark is saying, what are the top threats, let's say, to your candidacy? Who knows? I mean, you're in a crazy world of politics. People change their minds. I'm going to make America great again. Nobody else is going to be able to do that.
The first fans in line got there at 4 a.m.
But it's going to be worth the wait, I know it.
Why did they come?
Well, I just want to talk to him and let him know how much I support him and let him truly know that college students out there do support him.
It's worth the wait because he's really entertaining. He is super smart. He built this huge-ass business. Oh, I can't say ass, can I?
He's a businessman. He's all for the people.
Trump chatted with his fans and called us over when he heard a story he wanted to share with the world.
I'm 45 years old. I've never voted in an election in my entire life. I've never cared about voting in an election. I've never paid attention. I know about pop culture. I don't know anything about politics. I'm finally paying attention. I finally want to vote.
One fan, a stand-up comic, showed his love and affection for Trump in a special way. Were you sober or drunk when you got that?
I was totally sober.
After his first brush with Trump, we asked the stand-up comic to show us some of his act.
There is going to be a storm. Now, the storm is going to be big.
Pretty good Obama. Does he do a Trump?
And Hillary with the emails, look, it's going to be huge. All right, I'm a deal guy. Look, the art of the deal.
Very good.
It's the greatest celebration.
Very good.
And quite frankly, we're going to make America great again, and it's really going to be huge.
That's very good. Come here. Come here. Listen, that's better than the pros. He is a pro.
Very talented. All right, that guy was a pretty good mimic.
We got to hire that guy.
And, this was not a typical book event. He did a long press conference, took a lot of questions, and then signed books and, normal Trump Tower security and all. But I have to say that he does have, like a lot of the candidates, he does have fans who really like him. And there were people in line who were Democrats, etc. But to me, being a happy warrior is a great thing for a candidate. To me, the best thing for him about this book tour is, face it, he doesn't come in contact with that many voters like this. Yeah. He's doing a lot of retail with them today, and I think more on the tour.
I think one of the strange discontinuities of Trump is that he is a happy warrior in terms of his bearing, his temperament, in terms of how he goes out and rollicks his way, frolics and rollicks both. Yeah. But look, you look at this book from Stanley Greenberg. It says America Ascendant. And said, you got Donald Trump's book, Crippled America. Now, granted, there's a subtitle that says How to Make America Great Again, but I always think at some point the basic pessimism that he has about where the country is right now. He doesn't stand up and say, America's the greatest country in the world. He says, we're in the toilet. And I wonder whether you can win the presidency or even win the Republican nomination with a fundamentally pessimistic take on America.
Right. Well, as you know, he would say he twists to a positive take, but it's always, this is one of the double standards that works against Democrats. If a Democratic presidential candidate published a book called Crippled America, they would be just in huge trouble.
Right.
But Republicans get away with more negative rhetoric for whatever reason.
But though, I mean, it's one of those rules. The optimistic candidate almost always ends up prevailing. In both parties, optimism is kind of the coin of the realm. Interesting that Trump has done so well at this moment with at least a message that is fundamentally pessimistic at the outset.
Yeah. Now, I suspect, like most politicians, Trump will buy some copies for himself. But it's going to be it's going to be fascinating to see how well it. Well, it's going to be fascinating to see how well it sells. Some politicians publish books, presidential candidates. They go high up on the rankings. Be interesting to see if Trump's book goes to #1 or high. High has Ben Carson, etc. I have no idea, but it'll be interesting to see.
He has had #1 bestsellers in the past, I believe.
He has.
Possibly. He's spoken about those on a couple of occasions.
He has. I said to him, "This could be your biggest book." He said, "Oh, Art of the Deal, very, very good."
Never big.
But we'll see. The other interesting thing over there today,
I wonder if after the Bible and the Art of the Deal, this will be his third favorite book.
Might be. He seems like this. Somebody asked him why the cover photo shows him scowling.
Scowling, right?
He said they took all pictures of him smiling, but they decided in the end, if your title is Crippled America. You can't use a big smiley photo. I think might have thought that through before they the title.
I don't think it's the most flattering photo I've seen of him.
Crippled America. All right, when we come back, yes, it's our 24-hour campaign forecast in just 60 seconds after this word from our sponsors.
It's another busy day out there in election land, so let's go live to our 24-hour campaign forecast center, where our chief political meteorologist, Alexandra Trowbridge, is standing by. Alex, what you seeing on the Doppler for tomorrow?
Well, John, I wouldn't take anything for granted. Granite State, that is. Let's bring our high-def radar way into New Hampshire, where all fronts are going to be colliding tomorrow. Let's start with Concord. We got an inflow of Trump and O'Malley that are officially filing to get on the state ballot. Also, we're going to be watching this pattern, an early arrival of Graham at a senior center in Lebanon. That will move to Dartmouth and Nashua for town halls, but keep your eyes on Manchester, a classic political nor'easter, a high and a low within 4 miles of each other. Jeb starting his morning with an early education reform at the Founders Academy, and right in the region, Rubio teaming up with the Chamber of Commerce for a Life of the Party event at St. Anselm College. That low energy that we mentioned yesterday, it's heading right into some heavy perspiration. That's your 24-hour campaign forecast, and remember, just like a poncho or Ann Selzer on a Des Moines crosstab, we have got you covered. Back to you.
Thank you, Tro. That's very nice. Mark, I'm curious. The thing I liked best about Tro today was that Mitt Romney's face in the sun, source of all light and warmth in the Republican world, as you said earlier today.
Bush and Rubio in New Hampshire, head-to-head. You know, I don't think anybody at this point thinks either of those guys will win Iowa. Yeah. Their battle in Iowa to see who finishes higher is huge, but they both would like to think they could win New Hampshire. Head-to-head in that state, there'll be a lot of national and New Hampshire press. They're a big deal.
I continue to think that the answer to the question, the perennial question, where can Marco Rubio win in the first 4, is not South Carolina, where some people touted him earlier. I think New Hampshire is the place. If he gets hot, that is the state if he's going to plant his flag.
Third in New Hampshire, third in Iowa, first in New Hampshire is I think the Rubio path.
Right, you hear that you've been hearing it from New Hampshire people for months. Not that he was gaining ground there, but that he could, and now it seems like he might actually
be clear. That's just theoretical, Pat.
Yes, of course. I understand.
I'm not saying that. The other thing is, again, as we get closer to February, when Iowa and New Hampshire vote, you're going to see increasingly candidates say, you know what, do I want to go to Georgia for a fundraiser, or do I want to worry about a March contest? You're going to see more and more people going to Iowa and New Hampshire, because some cycles there's some doubt about whether those two states are going to be a big deal. Those two states are a huge deal, and they're only going to get bigger as we get closer to February.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. And again, you're going to see those guys. And I think a lot of people are going to really make the binary choice. We're going to see more candidates, I think, this time, in the end, either going to place all their chips or most of their chips on Iowa or most of their chips on New Hampshire, rather than trying to play evenly in both.
I got to say, in both sides, I still see even play. Even somebody like a Chris Christie, a John Kasich, they're still, I mean, they'll hedge one way or the other towards the end, but there's still going to be a lot of November, December hedging of bets by almost everybody. Yeah. Mike Huckabee obviously isn't playing in New Hampshire.
I do not.
A lot of candidates are playing in both.
Yeah, I do not believe.
Number.
I think by the time we get to January, when we turn the new year, John Kasich, Chris Christie, assuming they're still in the race, they will be living in New Hampshire and not spending much time
January,
in Iowa.
But November and December, because if you're the top establishment candidate in Iowa, and right now any of the 4 of them could be, it's something to fight for.
All right, that's it for the weather. We'll be right back.
We're on the telly for an hour, twice a day, starting at 5 Eastern and 8 Eastern, but we are live 24/7 always on our website, BloombergPolitics.com. You can check out our campaign tracker. That's always got the latest on 2016 and politics.
Also, you got to read John McCormick's story about the evangelical ground game in Iowa, and Sahel Kapoor's piece about Marco Rubio's immigration reform goes. And keep an eye for the results of today's most important electoral battle over legalizing weed in Ohio. Mark, you think that's going to happen?
I have no idea.
Let's hope. Fingers crossed. Tomorrow we'll also show you Mark's conversation with James Carville, and we'll have an interview with David Holbrook talking about the documentary he made about his dad. Until then, that would be Richard Holbrook, by the way. Until then, sayonara.